The 2023 NFL season is almost here. Today we are going to be breaking down every single team, predicting their record, all of the award winners, and of course an eventual Super Bowl champion. Let's dive right into it, starting with the AFC North. We have the Cincinnati Bengals at 13-4, the Baltimore Ravens at 11-6, the Steelers at 9-8, and the Browns at 8-9. I do think this will be a competitive division. I do think you could make the argument it is the best division in football. The Bengals have shown a lot of talent over the past few years. Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, T. Higgins. I think this is really the year that they have to put everything together before they really have to start paying people, and I think they are going to be a very good team this year. The Ravens at 11-6, you get that Lamar Jackson extension done. You bring in some playmakers for him, Odell Beckham, Zay Flowers. The defense is pretty good. I also think that bringing in Todd Monken is going to be big for Lamar Jackson's passing development as well, really show that he is one of the elite quarterbacks in the NFL. The Steelers are always going to be very good. I think it will be tough for them to be too much better than a little above 500 just because I do think Kenny Pickett's a solid quarterback, but I don't think he's one of the best in the AFC. The AFC as a whole is extremely competitive, as is the AFC North in particular, but that defense is going to carry them to a lot of success. And then the Browns at 8-9. You never know with the Browns. They're a top 10 roster in the NFL. They have a great offensive line. Nick Chubb's a fantastic running back. Deshaun Watson, it really just kind of depends on what we get from him. Last year, he was really terrible when he played, but we'll have to see if that is the case this year as well. I'm just not counting on the Browns to be super successful just because they haven't earned that benefit of the doubt, but they certainly could be very, very good as they're one of the most talented teams in the league. They just have to put everything together. Moving to the AFC East, we have the Buffalo Bills at 11-6, the Jets at 10-7, the Dolphins at 10-7, and the Patriots at 7-10. The Bills, I do think, are still the best team in this division. They have the best quarterback in Josh Allen, who is a perennial MVP candidate. He can just do it all. He's the strongest arm in the NFL. He's an absolute bulldozer when he runs, and he's definitely going to keep the Bills in this conversation for being one of the best teams in the AFC. But I do think the AFC East is ultra competitive as well. The Jets obviously made a huge move to go get Aaron Rodgers. I think they've got a lot of young talent. They do need to sort out the offensive line, but that defense was great last year. It probably only got better this year, and you bring in two-time MVP Aaron Rodgers. I definitely think that there's a chance that they are a much improved team with a real quarterback. We've been saying it for a long time. They just need that quarterback to get over the hump. Could Aaron Rodgers be that player? I absolutely think he could be. I have them finishing second in this division. The Dolphins, third at 10-7. It's all about Tua's health, really. Once again, an incredibly talented team. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle make up one of the best 1-2 wide receiver duos in the NFL. Tua is so good at that system as well. Mike McDaniel's really done a good job taking advantage of his strengths and making him a really solid quarterback when he's healthy. It's all about, can he avoid the concussions? Can he stay healthy and be out there for a full season and into the playoffs? If he is, I definitely think this Dolphins team could be very competitive. And then we have the Patriots at 7-10. Bill Belichick's always going to keep this team relatively competitive. I do think they were really harmed by terrible play calling from Matt Patricia last year. You bring in a real offensive mind in Bill O'Brien, and I definitely think this offense could be much better. Belichick is already one of the best defensive minds in the league. They just lack superstar talent. They lack explosiveness on offense. I do think that things could come together and they could be a team that absolutely nobody wants to play against. Nobody wants to play against Belichick and his defensive schemes, and he just gets the most out of every single one of his players on the roster. But I do think they lack some of that true high-end talent to be a real competitive force in such a talented AFC and AFC East. Next we have the AFC South. This is a much less talented division. I have the Jaguars at 10-7, Titans at 7-10, Colts at 6-11, and Texans at 5-12. I do think the Jaguars showed a nice step last year. Trevor Lawrence and Doug Peterson really, I thought, got the most out of each other there. And then additionally, you bring in Calvin Ridley this year. He's first time playing for the Jaguars after coming off that suspension. I definitely think he's going to be a very interesting piece for them and really kind of get this offense to potentially a new level. This defense really kind of needs to take shape. Trayvon Walker needs to show out. The linebackers really need to come together. but there's plenty of talent on this team. I do think they could be a competitor in the AFC. I do think they're the heavy favorite to win the AFC South, but I think the Titans could give them a good run for their money. The Titans were in the playoff race. It came down to the final game to determine who made the playoffs between them and the Jaguars last year, and they were led by Josh Dobbs and weren't far away from coming away with that win. I think the Titans are incredibly well coached with Vrabel. I do think Tannehill is a bit of a limiting factor, but Derrick Henry is one of the best players in the NFL. When he's able to consistently be out there getting the ball as often as he does, he is just a true game changer. That's really hard to find. That defense is incredibly underrated as well. They have some superstars, Jeffrey Simmons, Kevin Byard. I like a lot of the moves they've made this offseason as well. The offensive line's a complete mess. The quarterback plays inconsistent. There's a lot of issues with this Titans team, but I also think that they have earned a bit of a benefit of the doubt in this regard as well. Next, we have the Colts at 6-11. Anthony Richardson's going to make this team a lot of fun to watch. I do think Shane Steichen is a perfect coach for Richardson. He is going to start week 1, and I'll be very curious to see the growing pains that come with it. I don't think he's overly pro-ready, but I do think that Steichen's going to use his legs really effectively. He's going to get the most out of their players on deep downfield passes. Alec Pierce, somebody that I'm really excited to see him, if he can break out this year through that offense. I think the defense has some nice pieces. They've got some holes as well, but this Colts team could be very interesting to watch at the very least. And then we have the Texans at 5-12. You finally hopefully get your franchise quarterback in C.J. Stroud. You draft Will Anderson as well. D'Amico Ryans was a great hire. I think the roster is still very clearly a few years away from being a real competitive force, but I do think this Texans team could be a lot more bearable to watch, which is a huge improvement over the previous few years. Then we have the AFC West, of course, headlined by the Kansas City Chiefs, the reigning Super Bowl champions. I have them at 13-4, the Chargers at 9-8, Broncos at 7-10, and the Raiders at 5-12. The Chiefs really just deserve to have this top spot until somebody else takes it from them. You got to go through the Chiefs or the Chiefs win it, basically, for the past 5 years or so, and Mahomes is always going to keep them in that as long as he remains healthy. Kelsey remains one of the best players in the league as well. This defense is really good. The offensive line's great. They are just always going to be in that mix with Patrick Mahomes at the helm. Next, we have the Chargers at 9-8, and this is pretty much very contingent on health and their ability to just kind of get the most out of their players. The Chargers have consistently underperformed. I like their roster. Once again, they probably have a top 10 roster in the NFL. But the AFC is incredibly competitive. The Chargers have not done a good job down the stretch, really winning close games and closing out games really effectively, getting the most out of their players, staying healthy. They just have a tendency for really not living up to the incredibly high expectations that their roster kind of sets for them. I think Brandon Staley is an incredibly mediocre to bad coach. I thought he should have been fired. I do like bringing Kellen Moore and, getting Lombardi out of the building and hopefully opening up this offense a bit for Justin Herbert, but I still think Staley is a big limiting factor. I just don't know that they are going to be able to get over that hump and really be able to compete in the AFC that is just so good. They have the talent to do so, absolutely, but I do think I am just a little bit lower on them this year than some others. Then we have the Broncos at 7-10. I just think that Sean Payton can't fix all of the problems that they had last year. Russell Wilson looks to be past his prime and not really able to win in the same ways that made him so successful back in Seattle. He no longer has that escapability, that pocket movement. He really still can't attack the middle of the field, which is such a staple of Sean Payton's offense. So I'd be very interested to see how those two mesh together. The defense is solid. I do think losing Ejiro Evero is going to be a big deal for this defense, but I do think overall they have the talent, in theory, to be a competitor, but I just don't see it all coming together. There's a lot of moving pieces, and I'm just not confident in Russell Wilson to get back to his Seattle level. And then we have the Raiders at 5-12. I don't think that they're going to be very good. Jimmy G, well, not much worse of a quarterback than Derek Carr. He might even be better. He's just not able to consistently stay healthy. And then at that point, you're starting guys that really shouldn't ever touch the field at quarterback. Devontae Adams is great. You've got some playmakers. The defense has Max Crosby and Nate Hobbs, but that's about it. And Josh McDaniels has his work cut out for him. He's really kind of got to get creative because I do think this offense could be pretty stagnant, and I do think the Raiders unfortunately, are likely to be one of the worst teams in the league this year. Now moving to the NFC North, I think this will be a very competitive division. None of these teams I think necessarily are world beaters, but I do think this division will be very competitive. Could see any of the 4 teams making some noise. I have the Vikings at 10-7, the Lions at 10-7, the Packers at 8-9, and the Bears at 8-9. I think the Vikings are being slept on a little bit here. They had a really nice season. Obviously, a lot of their wins were close one-score games, and they're likely not going to be able to maintain that same kind of success in those one-score games. But I do think they deserve some credit for their year last year. Obviously, losing in the first round was disappointing, but they were a very solid team. I think Kevin O'Connell did a great job with the offense, really kind of getting the most out of those guys. Justin Jefferson remains, the best wide receiver in the NFL. The Lions, I think, are a fun team to root for. They just, with Dan Campbell, the energy they have, Jared Goff. I will say I did disagree with some of their offseason moves, getting Jahmyr Gibbs that high. But I do think overall there is a lot of talent on this team, and I get why a lot of people think that they will win the NFC North. It's certainly going to be competitive, and I definitely think the Lions will be in that mix. Then we have the Packers, and it's all about Jordan Love. How is he going to respond now as the franchise quarterback? I thought he was a very talented prospect coming out. Now sitting for as long as he has a chance to come in and, really kind of take over this franchise and see what he can do. You can't really say one way or the other whether he's going to be great or not. It's just kind of going to be a wait and see, and I do think that he has the tools to be successful. He's kind of waited and learned the offense, and I do think that he's shown some flashes at times in the limited action he has had. I am optimistic that he is going to be pretty good for the Packers, but I don't think that's something you can especially count on. And then the Chicago Bears, I think Justin Fields is going to take a big step now that he finally has some wide receivers. His offensive line is pretty well built out as well. I do think the defense still lacks some real star power on the front seven, that defensive line in particular. They really need to add a true kind of weapon on that defensive line at some point. Getting Yannick Ngakoue was nice, but he's a terrible run defender, and I do think he is a solid pass rusher, but you're not really counting on him to be a true game changer. I think the Bears have the talent. They might just be 1 year away from really being a true competitor in the NFC North. Next, the NFC East. This is also a very competitive division. I have the Eagles going 12-5, the Cowboys at 10-7, the Giants at 9-8, and the Commanders at 5-12. The Eagles, I do think, still have the best roster in the NFL, just from top to bottom. You've got so much depth, especially at key areas, at offensive line, defensive line, wide receiver. They've just got so much talent at those spots. Jalen Hurts really took a step up and was an MVP caliber player last year. His running ability has really opened up this offense, and A.J. Brown was just a true get for them last year in the offseason. So I definitely think the Eagles have a lot of talent, and I wouldn't be surprised at all for them to repeat as NFC East champions. That would be the first repeat winner in a very long time. The Cowboys also have some nice things. I think Dak Prescott's a solid quarterback. CeeDee Lamb is just a fantastic wide receiver. You've also got Brandon Cooks and some other options. The offensive line's really, really good. And you've got Micah Parsons and a really fun defense coached by Dan Quinn. So I definitely think this would be a very competitive team. And a pretty weak NFC. I definitely think the Cowboys have a shot to be competitive. It's just about getting over that hump. I do think Mike McCarthy is a mediocre head coach, so they kind of got to ride over that hump there, but I definitely think the Cowboys could be very competitive in this NFC East. I have the Giants at 9-8. I do think they slightly overperformed last year relative to the talent on their roster, but I do think Brian Daboll's a fantastic coach. He's going to get the most out of their players. I actually think they have a slightly better roster this year than they did last year. Love the defense. Dexter Lawrence, one of the best interior defensive linemen in the league. You've got a really nice defensive line and some nice players in the secondary as well that I really like. Deonte Banks in particular. I loved that pick for them. So I think the Giants have a really nice roster. I will be curious to see if they can repeat some of their success, if the league figures out their schemes at all, if they're able to stop the run game and really force Daniel Jones to beat you with your arm. I do think that could be a recipe for defenses to really kind of get the Giants behind and then make them really kind of win with Daniel Jones. And I do think that could lead to them having a bit more struggles than they did last year, but ultimately this is still an incredibly well-coached team, and they've got some real nice players as well. Then we have the Commanders at 5-12. Not super high on Sam Howell. I definitely think he has the talent. I love his wide receivers. Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin are fantastic players. The offensive line's a little beat up. The defense, I do think has some playmakers now. You get Emmanuel Forbes in there. That defensive line is still a great unit as well. So they have the talent. If Howell's really able to kind of put everything together, they could definitely win 8-9 games and kind of be in the mix for the playoffs as well. But it is a very tough division, and I do think the Commanders will suffer slightly from having that inexperience at quarterback. Now, the NFC South, this division is really bad. We've got the Falcons at 9-8, the Panthers at 8-9, the Saints at 7-10, and the Buccaneers at 4-13. I really like what the Falcons have done to really kind of, play to their strengths. I do think they have a great run-blocking offensive line, so they go out and get the best running back prospect that I've ever scouted in Bijan Robinson. Even though they had an 1,000-yard rusher in Tyler Algier last year, they're really doubling down. And, I think Arthur Smith is one of the best run game coaches in the entire NFL. I think he's going to get the most out of this run game, that offensive line. Not to put too much pressure on Desmond Ridder to really be an elite-level quarterback. Just let him use play action to set up some easy passes, to get the crossing routes going. And they have an athletic, really interesting group of wideouts as well. You've got Kyle Pitts, Drake London, some really interesting pieces for the Falcons. The defense, they've also kind of finally invested in. You get Jesse Bates, you get Calais Campbell, some interesting pieces on that defense. I don't think the Falcons will be great, but I do think they have the most complete team in this NFC South. The Panthers have probably the highest upside with the best quarterback in Bryce Young. I did think he was a blue-chip quarterback prospect, and besides his size, I really didn't have any concerns about him coming out. He's a true improviser. He's a playmaker, somebody that I really, really liked. They got to get him some help in that wide receiver room. It's kind of bare, but the defense is really interesting. They've got a great coaching staff that I really believe in, and I wouldn't be at all surprised to see the Panthers win this division. I think they'll be pretty close to it. The Saints at 7-10 up next. Derek Carr, I am not really a super strong believer in at this point in his career. I loved him early on in his career in Vegas and, thought he was incredibly underrated for a time. But, he played really poorly last year. And I don't mind the Saints going and getting him, but he really wasn't better than Andy Dalton last year. And I like the Saints for some of their players. Chris Olave is a really fun player for them. That defense, they've got some pieces, Marshawn Lattimore as well as Cam Jordan, Pete Werner, I really like as well. Of course, you have Demario Davis. You've got some good safeties as well. This is a decent roster, but I just don't believe in Dennis Allen. I'm a little bit lukewarm on Derek Carr at this point. I think the running game is okay, but Alvin Kamara is probably not going to be able to play the full season. So I'm just a little bit cooler on the Saints. And then we have the Buccaneers at 4-13. Whether it's Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask, I don't believe in them, point blank, period. And then, you've got some good weapons at least, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, but the offensive line's kind of in a state of flux. Todd Bowles is not somebody that I really believe in as a head coach either. So I do expect the Buccaneers to struggle and be in the Caleb Williams or Drake May sweepstakes come draft time. Then we have the NFC West, the 49ers at 13-4, Seahawks at 10-7, the Rams at 5-12, and the Cardinals at 3-14. Do think this is a pretty lopsided division. I think the 49ers are incredibly talented, probably regardless of who's playing quarterback for them, whether it's Lance, Darnold, Purdy. It doesn't really matter. I think they're going to be pretty good, which is hard to say because quarterback's so important, but for a Shanahan system that makes it easier on the quarterback, they've got so much talent around them. That defense is the best in the NFL. Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, a solid offensive line. I think the 49ers are the best team in this division. They go 13-4. The Seahawks at 10-7. I really liked what the Seahawks did last year. They reignited my belief in Pete Carroll. Geno Smith came out of nowhere and had a great year, and I really like the way they have built this offense in particular. You've got Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, a two-headed monster at running back. You've got three great wide receivers in Metcalf, Smith and Jigba, and Tyler Lockett. The defense still has a little bit to be desired, but I like that back end with Tariq Woolen and Devon Witherspoon. The linebackers are pretty solid as well. You've just got to get some consistent pass rush, and I think this Seahawks team could really be a force in the NFC. The Rams at 5-12. The roster is really young and bad at this point. Matthew Stafford, it's all about health. How long is he able to stay healthy? I still think McVay is one of the best coaches in the league. And you still have Cooper Kupp, you still have Aaron Donald. But it's really kind of a team more headlined by superstars and a complete lack of depth or really starting caliber talent across the roster as a whole. I think they're 2 injuries away from really being a devastatingly bad team. So I have the Rams at 5-12, and then the Cardinals at 3-14. I do think that once Kyler Murray comes back, they could be a little bit better. I do think Gannon was an interesting hire for them, but this team just lacks talent on offense and defense. The defense is absolutely putrid, and the offense has some pieces. I do think Kyler's an underrated player at this point, but I just don't think they have the talent to really be competitive, especially with Kyler missing likely the first half at least of the year. So those were my record predictions. Let's dive into the awards for the 2023 NFL season. For MVP, I'm going to go with Joe Burrow. There is a little bit of fatigue that sets in with players that have won the award multiple times. I think that could happen with Patrick Mahomes. It's pretty much the best quarterback award at this point, and I do think the Bengals are going to be a very good team. Burrow hasn't won it at this point, and like I said, I do think the Bengals will be successful this year, so I have him leading the MVP conversation. Offensive Player of the Year went a little bit different. You obviously could go with Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, some of those options, but I'm going to go with Garrett Wilson. I think he's poised to have a monster year in New York. He's going to be on Hard Knocks. You've got the Aaron Rodgers factor. A lot of people are going to be watching the New York Jets this year, and I think that Garrett Wilson's going to put on an absolute show. He was the Offensive Rookie of the Year last year, and I think for good reason. And it looks like Aaron Rodgers and him have developed a really nice rapport. I do think he's going to have a fantastic year and could be a sneaky pick for that Offensive Player of the Year award. Defensive Player of the Year, I think it's going to be Micah Parsons. He's reportedly getting more edge reps. I think regardless, he's going to kind of take over. He's just such a dominant pass rusher. In a big market like Dallas, it's going to be a lot of attention. I don't think he's going to face as many double teams as some of the other top edge rushers. I don't think Bosa would necessarily win it again just because of that fatigue that we mentioned. So I think Parsons makes a lot of sense. He's kind of the next of those elite level pass rushers that haven't won it yet, him or Myles Garrett. And I think Parsons just faces less double teams. He's probably going to be on a better team as well, so that's why he gets the edge there. Offensive Rookie of the Year, it's likely going to be Bijan Robinson. I think Robinson or Bryce Young are really the only two options that I think are super reasonable. Bijan, I think, is just going to challenge for the rushing title with how much the Falcons want to run the ball. They drafted him in the top 10 to use him, and I think they absolutely will. He's going to be a force in the receiving game as well. So unless Bryce Young really kind of turns the Panthers franchise around, maybe makes the playoffs and is really, really good, I think Bijan Robinson is a very safe pick for the Offensive Rookie of the Year. Defensive Rookie of the Year, I don't think there's a ton of clear-cut options. Willie Anderson, I don't think is going to likely be on a good enough team to really kind of warrant this award, and I do think he'll be getting doubled because there's just not a lot else on that Texans defense that you need to be worried about. Witherspoon, it's tough for corners to win the award, but Sauce Gardner won it last year. Marshawn Lattimore won it a few years ago as well. I think Witherspoon is going to be on a team that they don't want to throw it at Tariq Woolen all the time necessarily, so Witherspoon's going to have chances to show off his ball skills. I thought he was incredibly pro-ready, and I do think the Seahawks will have some leads, so teams are going to have to throw against them, and I definitely think he's going to be in the mix there for that Defensive Rookie of the Year. Comeback Player of the Year, it's going to be Damar Hamlin. He has minus odds on most sports books because I think the second he takes a snap this year, he will win the award. Obviously great for him, but I do think it is pretty clear-cut that he's going to win this award, barring something remarkable. And then Coach of the Year, going to go with Dan Campbell. I do think that he's incredibly likable. If he can get this Lions team into the playoffs and make them competitive, I definitely think that he'll be in that mix. They like to give it to a team that, maybe wasn't supposed to be as good as they were, and they really kind of get the most out of their players, and I think Campbell has been doing that, and I definitely think that he's a likable guy. He's well-respected within the community in the NFL, and so I definitely think he'll be in that mix for Coach of the Year. Now moving to the bracket, as you can see, this is what we're looking at when it comes to the playoffs. I am going to go with the Jacksonville Jaguars losing to the Baltimore Ravens in the first round. I think that the Ravens are going to be a very strong wild card team and a tough out for likely whoever that 3 or 4 seed is. The Jaguars get them at home, but I do think the Ravens win that game. The Bills and the Jets, that'll be a tough one. I do have the Bills coming out on top. And then we have the Bengals versus the Dolphins. I think the Bengals are going to be incredibly good. Next, we have the Falcons versus the Lions. Going to go with the Lions in an upset here. I do think the Falcons could be a tough team to beat at home. If they are going against a team that really can't stop the run and they don't really buy into that hard-nosed culture, I think the Lions are, a good matchup in the fact that they can match up with that aggressiveness and really kind of be a good force for that Falcons team. And then I'm actually going to go with the Seahawks over the Vikings. I love the Seahawks. I think they will get better as the season goes on, and I really like the explosiveness of this offense to be a really fun team to watch in the NFC. Going to go with the Eagles over the Cowboys as well. I just, like I said, think the Eagles have the most complete roster in this league. Then we have the Chiefs versus the Ravens, the Bills versus the Bengals, the Lions versus the Eagles, and the Seahawks versus the 49ers. The NFL does reseed, so that's why you see the Seahawks and the Lions flip there. Going to go with the Chiefs over the Ravens and the Bengals over the Bills. I do think that it is very likely that we see this AFC Championship rematch for a third year in a row. I just think they have the two best quarterbacks in the NFL. They both have fantastic rosters, and this is just such a fun rivalry to watch. So I definitely think it would be very interesting to see that for a third year in a row. Going to go with the Seahawks, actually upsetting the 49ers. Like I said, just love the explosiveness. I think they're a team that can be very hard to beat, and not somebody that a lot of one seeds or high seeds would want to come up against in the playoffs as a wild card team. Then I have the Eagles beating the Lions. I just think, like I said before, the Eagles just have a complete roster. They can win in a variety of different ways, which makes them so difficult to really kind of defend against. So that makes it the Bengals versus Chiefs and the Eagles versus Seahawks in the championship games. Going to go with the Bengals getting their revenge on the Chiefs. I do think, like I said, the Bengals are kind of in a win now immediate mode, because after next year you might lose DJ Reader, you might lose T. Higgins, you might lose some really important pieces. So the Bengals really have to go all in on this year. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes is going to keep them very, very competitive in this game, but I'm going to have the Bengals in a close one. Then I'm going to go with the Eagles over the Seahawks. That finally, that magical Seahawks run comes to an end, and that gives us a Bengals versus Eagles Super Bowl. I think that would be a very fun one to watch. Going to go with the Bengals winning it. I do think that they just have a very complete team. The depth is better than it really ever has been. You look at the defensive line, they really go 8 or 9 deep. They're really impressive. The offensive line's much better than it ever has been. You've got the three-headed monster at wide receiver. The cornerback room is really deep, and you don't have Eli Apple anymore. Really, the only concern would be the safety room, and I think Dax Hill has all the talent in the world to be really, really good. You bring back your entire coaching staff that they've had for the last 5 years or so. It's just absurd how well they've been able to keep that group together, and it is really impressive. Lou Anarumo is probably the best defensive coordinator in the league at this point in time, and Zach Taylor's really improved his play calling. I have the Bengals as my Super Bowl champion and Joe Burrow as Super Bowl MVP. And that's going to do it for my full 2023 season predictions. Let me know how you think your favorite team will do. Who do I have doing too well? Who do I have not doing well enough? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like this kind of video, please hit that subscribe button as well. It really helps grow the channel and would mean a lot for me. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day. I'll see you in the next one.